Today, we're unpacking a history that is frankly as fascinating as it is dark. We're looking at the 90-year history behind the world's most popular sport. Whenever the World Cup rolls around, it's incredibly easy for us to just get completely swept up in the narratives on the field, right? The underdog stories, the intense rivalries, the sheer drama of the game itself. But off the pitch, there is a complex, deeply political game being played.
So let's dive into this massive historical question. We are going to explore exactly how a global spectacle is repeatedly used to sanitize political power. Because when you actually look at the last century of evidence, a very clear, undeniable pattern emerges. FIFA, the governing body of international football, has consistently colluded with authoritarian leaders, essentially turning a blind eye to severe human rights abuses in exchange for putting on the ultimate show.
Here's our roadmap for today. We'll be covering Section 1, the Dictator's Playbook. Section 2, Mussolini's 1934 propaganda machine. Section 3, Argentina's 1978 distract and deflect strategy. Section 4, modern sports washing in Russia and Qatar. Section 5, the 2026 human rights hypocrisy. And finally, Section 6, the ultimate fan dilemma.
Let's start with Section 1, the Dictator's Playbook.
What's really fascinating here is the clear 90-year cyclical pattern. This is not just some one-off event in history. It's a calculated strategy spanning entirely different continents and completely different political eras. From Italy to Argentina, from Russia to Qatar, and looking ahead to the US, our sources show this recurring theme: host nations leveraging the massive cultural weight of the World Cup to deflect away from their own domestic or international controversies.
Moving on to Section 2. Mussolini's 1934 propaganda machine.
By 1934, Benito Mussolini desperately needed a global distraction. At home, he had banned all opposition parties, and his secret police had murdered his most vocal socialist critic, Giacomo Matteotti. And internationally, he was presiding over a horrific genocide in Libya with a death toll of up to 83,000 people. To hide all of this from the global stage, Mussolini realized that football could create an incredibly powerful, emotional link with the public.
And this just brilliantly illustrates how he turned a sporting event into a domestic propaganda machine. Mussolini used the Italian national team to project his fascist ideal of the new man, this militaristic, incredibly strong figure. The sources detail how he even went as far as pressuring referees to favor Italy and awarded a separate, entirely fabricated trophy named after himself, the Coppa del Duce. Experts note that this resulted in a collective erasure of history that persists in Italy even today. People remember the team's victory, sure, but that dark fascist context? It's completely stripped away.
That brings us to Section 3, Argentina 1978, distract and deflect.
The contrast in 1978 was just horrifying. On one hand, you have FIFA and the international community celebrating peace with the release of white doves. This was backed by a massive $1 million American PR campaign designed specifically to sanitize the Argentina junta's image. But the reality? The dirty war raged on. Up to 30,000 citizens were disappeared or killed. Shockingly, the ESMA Detention and Notorious Torture Center operated literally just 1 mile away from the main stadium where fans were cheering.
And to guarantee this massive PR victory on the field, the source notes that the Argentine military junta mysteriously donated 35,000 tons of grain to Peru right before their match. Following this rather well-timed donation and a reported locker room visit by General Videla himself to intimidate the Peruvian players, Argentina won a highly suspicious 6-0 match. This secured their path to ultimately win the tournament and completely solidify their soft power victory. Let's move into the 21st century with Section 4, Modern Sports Washing, Russia and Qatar.
First, let's define exactly what we mean when we talk about these modern tournaments, because it really anchors the complex geopolitics we're looking at today. Sports washing. It is the modern term for exactly what Mussolini and Videla were doing back in the day. It's the strategic use of sports to clean up a tarnished reputation and distract from human rights violations.
And the staggering pattern of human rights violations that FIFA has actively chosen to overlook is extremely well documented. Just look at 2018. By the time of the World Cup in Russia, Vladimir Putin had already invaded Crimea and cracked down heavily on domestic opposition. Yet he was warmly embraced by the international sports community. Fast forward to Qatar in 2022, and the global focus shifted to severe labor exploitation under the kafala system. That led to numerous migrant worker deaths during a massive $220 billion infrastructure build for the tournament, all alongside the country's strict anti-LGBTQ laws.
So looking at that data, we really have to ask the central question of our analysis today. Why? Why does this governing body allow itself to be used this way? Why ignore their own stated human rights frameworks time and time again?
Well, experts like Minky Warden point out that it is a mutually beneficial exchange. Authoritarian leaders get global legitimacy and incredible soft power. But why does FIFA do it? It's simple. Autocratic regimes offer them total, unchecked control. Stadiums get built without democratic red tape or pushback from citizens, and the massive, tax-free revenue engine just keeps turning, regardless of the human cost. Basically, FIFA gets the ultimate frictionless environment to put on a show, and the host nation gets the ultimate global distraction.
Now let's look at Section 5, the 2026 Human Rights Hypocrisy.
So, the upcoming 2026 tournament in North America was intended to break from this dark past, with a strict human rights framework protecting everyone involved. However, critics in our sources highlight a deep hypocrisy here. They point out that the tournament is going to happen against the backdrop of highly controversial domestic policies in the U.S. regarding immigrants, protesters, and transgender rights.
Observers also point out what they see as a glaring double standard in Western media. They note the intense calls to boycott Qatar, compared to relative silence on Western foreign policies. Just look at the massive outrage when Qatar's emir placed a traditional bisht on Lionel Messi in 2022. Now contrast that with the universal acceptance and celebration when Pelé wore a Mexican sombrero back in 1970. It really forces us to question our own biases and how sports washing is perceived and scrutinized on a global scale.
Which brings us to our final section, Section 6, the ultimate fan dilemma. Journalist Jasmine Guards perfectly captures the whiplash of holding two truths at once. She notes that we have to look at these events with a mix of equal parts love and trepidation. Because honestly, you can completely love the culture of the game, the joy, and the passion on the pitch, but completely despise how governments and organizations use it as a political shield off the pitch. So, I want to leave you with this provocative thought as you watch the next tournament unfold. It is the ultimate fan dilemma. Can we really separate the art from the artist, or in this case, the sport from the state? As the next World Cup approaches, I highly encourage you to dig deeper into the sources we've explored today and keep a very close eye on what is happening in the shadows of the stadium lights.